Them, the topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. We have a busy show today, and a lot of it's going to center on what's happening in courts. I know we do that a lot with Kelly Shackelford, but some of these cases are outside that realm, his realm of religious liberty. But this one does address religious liberty, and we're going to be joined later in the program by Wesley Smith talking about a Catholic hospital. Court has ruled that this hospital can be sued for refusing transgender hysterectomy. That means hysterectomy on a man. That ought to be interesting. We will talk about it with Wesley Smith. He's a bioethicist, and he wrote an article in National Review, which we've published at pointofview.net, so you can take a look at that. Also, there are many ways in which the left is trying to bring this nation down, and one filmmaker has actually put this all together in a movie called Agenda 2, and he is Curtis Bowers. Years ago, we covered Agenda 1, Grinding America Down, and this one promises to be just as good, if not better, with a lot of experts warning us in the ways that this is happening. Curtis Bowers says that the left is using the deep state and that the 2020 elections are absolutely crucial for really the future of America, not just in our politics or laws, but our existence. So you won't want to miss that. That's in the next hour, in the second hour. Also, the Supreme Court is hearing oral arguments today on a case. It's really a sex discrimination case, and actually there are three cases, but the one that we're really going to kind of look at, it's being argued by the Alliance Defending Freedom, who are friends of ours. And this case has to do with a funeral home where there was a manager of the home, and he was there for 6 years as a man, decided to switch to a woman after 6 years. And for various reasons, the funeral home fired him. And can they do that? The ACLU is bringing the sex discrimination case. Actually, the government was suing the funeral home for a while under Obama. But once President Trump came in, the government switched sides and is actually on the side of defining sex as male and female, not gender identity and sexual orientation. It's actually has huge repercussions for many of the issues we talk about. So we'll unpack that a little and continue to do that over the months between the arguments today and the actual time when we hear the ruling. But that's going to be another one of those big cases that affects a lot of things that Christians and conservatives care about. And then we're going to talk with Chris Towne from 40 Days for Life of Plano, Texas. In just a few minutes, we'll do that because they've been showing some real successes in that movement. And so we'll talk about that and also just some various issues having to do with the sanctity of life. I mentioned yesterday that there is, there's an article at pointofview.net about this, but the Supreme Court actually has affirmed the right of Louisiana to sue to protect its abortion laws. And this one particular law has to do with admitting privileges to hospitals. Louisiana wants to require abortionists to have admitting privileges to hospitals about 30 miles away or less. The Texas law requiring that was struck down, but it's different now. First of all, their situation is slightly different. Second, two new justices on the court, Kavanaugh and Gorsuch. So that ought to be interesting. Let me ask you a question here. As we look at elections coming up, what do you think? And I'm just going to let you answer this question throughout the program. You can call in, even if we've got another guest on, or we're perhaps ending up with another guest. This is a long program. You've got 2 hours to listen to us, and people listening online have 3. So you can call in anytime during the program to answer this question. The question is, do celebrity endorsements affect who you support in elections? And this, it was brought up by a column that I saw in the Washington Post today by Arthur Brooks. And he said, well, first of all, he asked the question, in political news or is it entertainment news? He reports that Scarlett Johansson has endorsed Elizabeth Warren for president in 2020. Tom Hanks is lined up behind Joe Biden, and Miley Cyrus is publicly supporting Bernie Sanders. And so, his question is, who cares? Who really cares? And he kind of talks about who does care about celebrity endorsements. But my question to you is, do you care? In fact, do you care? Do you go with someone that an actor or actress you like supports? Or do you see their support as a reason to run away from that candidate? We can unpack that as the show progresses, but I would love to hear from you and just what your answer is to that question. Here's the question again. Do celebrity endorsements affect who you support? You can actually start calling in now, and we will take the calls, even if we have to interrupt another topic, and we'll just start tallying this up. So give us a call, 800-351-1212. And then speaking of elections, and speaking of the sanctity of life, because in the next segment we're going to talk about life issues, Elizabeth Warren was caught lying about getting fired as a teacher for being pregnant. She's been on the campaign trail and in interviews lately, actually for the last several months, she's been rehashing a story about how she was fired by a principal, ending her first year of teaching because she was, quote, visibly pregnant. She said this several times. She's written it. She said it. She's on the campaign trail. She's basically used it as, poor me. I was a victim of sex discrimination. Kind of like her claim that she was Native American that was debunked. She's doing this again. When do couldn't she have learned from this? Because she's told the story like half a dozen times, and she even wrote it in her autobiography. She even spoke these words this past Wednesday at a campaign stop, and also last May and other times. She was claiming to be a victim of workplace discrimination. So we're finding out now that was actually not the case, that she was not fired, that she was only in a temporary teaching position because she didn't have the credits to be a full-time employee. She would have to go back to school if she wanted to keep her position there. But because of her soon-to-be-born child, she decided that it wouldn't be a good time to go back to school, so she left her job of her own accord. She was not fired by the principal. Now, what she did do was go back to school. She applied to law school instead of continuing her teaching career, and she's had quite a career teaching law. So, and I think she practiced too. But it's quite a different scenario than she was claiming, says the Washington Post. I'm sorry, not the Washington Post. It was in the Washington Post, but this is another paper, Life News. But it's quite a different scenario than being a victim of workplace discrimination, according to Warren's own words. So it seems their strategy is to ignore this as long as possible. This is the campaign. They're ignoring this. But now they have to spin the story as bad for Trump. And the same thing happened with the Pocahontas story. So perhaps we'll be able to keep that one alive, too. It's just sort of laughable. I mean, she's got a lot of support. She doesn't really need a lie to get the liberals to get behind her. Well, ladies and gentlemen, Chris Towne will join me in a moment. We'll be back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
So many Christians around the world are facing religious persecution. That's why I was encouraged by President Trump's speech at the UN meeting on religious freedom. Vice President Mike Pence introduced the president. That should give you some indication of how serious the current administration takes this issue. A week ago, I interviewed Gary Bauer about the speech on my radio program. You can find out more at his American Values website. Here are just a few of the significant comments by the president. He said the United States is founded on the principle that our rights do not come from government, they come from God. The president added, our founders understood that no right is more fundamental to a peaceful, prosperous, and virtuous society than the right to follow one's religious convictions. He declared with one clear voice that the United States of America calls on the nations of the world to end religious persecution. He also added that protecting religious freedom was one of the highest priorities since it is estimated that 11 Christians are killed every day for following the teachings of Christ. He explained that the U.S. was forming a coalition of U.S. businesses for the protection of religious freedom, and he ended by asking every nation to join in this urgent moral duty. He added, we ask the governments of the world to honor the eternal right of every person to follow their conscience, live by their faith, and give glory to God. The United States has a vital role in this critical mission. Perhaps you can see why I thought this was an important speech that was nearly ignored by the mainstream media. In fact, one CNN headline dismissed the speech by pointing out that his speech kept him from attending the UN Climate Summit that day. We must pray for the persecuted church, and we should support any leader that focuses our attention on the plight of Christians around the world. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and I'm pleased to bring to the microphone someone who's been in studio with me before, Christopher Towne, and he is ambassador for the Texas Right to Life. He actually works in the Plano, Collin County area, but he's great on all the issues that really we are looking at with the sanctity of life. And so I wanted to bring him back. And first of all, hi, Chris. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yes, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Chris, I wanted to get, first of all, an update on how 40 Days for Life is going. Just first of all, for people that weren't listening when you were on before, explain what this is.
Yeah, so it's a peaceful prayer vigil that we have out front of the Plano Planned Parenthood. Actually, there's 504 vigils that are going on for 40 days in October and November.
That's around the country?
It's around the country,
okay.
Yes, ma'am. And we're just praying for, the sanctity of life. We're praying for the individuals that go inside of the Planned Parenthood, and that includes the mothers and the children, too.
Wow. That's I don't know, for those of our audience who have seen the movie Unplanned, you really see what that entails. It's kind of, it's a serious activity. It's something that volunteers do, but you got to be pretty convicted about the sanctity of life to do it, don't you?
Yes. I see a lot of wonderful volunteers that are coming out. Currently, we receive, roughly about 20 individuals a day that's coming out and praying, and it's just a powerful movement. We're getting a lot of support by the people that pass by. It's just something that I'm excited to do. It's something that I'm happy to just really contribute with the individuals and my family.
So do you have quite a few volunteers in Plano?
Yeah. We have, I would say, roughly about 20 a day that come out.
Wow.
That's some people that are just doing hours, some people that are doing longer. Sometimes people do multiple days, but it's really just an opportunity for us to really demonstrate to the public of the tragedy that's happening at those Planned Parenthoods.
Yeah, it's hard to, in a sense, we don't really think about it, but in our midst, these babies' lives are being snuffed out, and it's hard to think about that. I live in Plano, so I don't even think about that every day. The fact that that's happening there, right there in my neighborhood.
Yeah, I think it's a great opportunity because a lot of us individuals we're just really concerned about our own lives, and it gives us the opportunity to get out in front of the public and just remind them that this is a tragedy, this is happening, and it's happening in our communities. And it's just planting those seeds. That's really what I like to call it. So people could go back home at night, or even if it touches them a year or two later, that's something that those seeds could grow and prosper and really understand what's going on with this.
So I saw a news report that the campaign, and this may be a little bit outdated, but has saved, across the country, has saved 93 babies from abortion so far. Do you have better numbers?
I do. Let me look that up. Abortion right now, we have 16,000 babies that have been saved from abortion.
Okay, then this is this must be a local area or a smaller area.
Yeah, so for the Complete 40 Days campaign, before it started, there's 16,000 babies that have been saved from abortion, 190 abortion workers that have been converted and are actually no longer abortion workers. And since it started, we had 100 abortion centers closed.
Is this the total of the 40 Days for Life campaign?
Yes.
Okay, that's where the discrepancy is.
Yeah. So that number is probably a local campaign that you have.
Yeah.
But just total through the 40 Days for Life campaign, since it started, I want to say about, I don't want to put a number on it, but I believe it's been about 12 years. It's something that has been significant. We've seen a lot of prosper, just showing the community, just, really putting that presence out there that, hey, this is happening. It's really helping overall with us just stopping this. And as you know, abortions from the early 90s to now, early 90s average abortions per year were 1 million, and now they're down to 600. So again, it's dropping, and it's something that as long as we really continue to have that message and we continue to show our community that we support this and we believe in this message, it's going to continue to drop, and hopefully eventually it will. We won't have abortion anymore.
Yes, and I think that anything that people do that demonstrates the horror of this, and I think when people are going to stand out in front of a place and take their time to talk to people about it, that demonstrates that there's a real issue here. That helps people understand how serious this is. And Chris, you're a former Marine, so you've done combat duty. You've been in Iraq. You've also been in the Army. I mean, you've spent a lot of time in the military. So can you compare that experience with what you're doing now?
Yeah, so, honestly, with me, I just want to, when I was in the military, I really felt the need to help my fellow man, really help my community, help my country. And really the way I look at this is I'm still serving my community. I'm still serving my country because, I might not be in that aspect of being deployed or being in the military anymore, but this is a need. This is something that we have to fight for. And if we're not fighting for this, then, really the problem is going to consist until it just gets worse and worse and worse.
I think the pro-life movement, in some senses, even though there's a lot of abortion going on, the movement as a whole is a success story. And we can talk about some of the numbers later, but I do want to ask you to tell our listeners how they can get involved if they live in Collin County, say, or Dallas. I don't know if you've got the information for that, but how can people get involved in 40 Days for Life?
Well, first off, I would like to invite everybody, if you're living in Plano, in front of the Planned Parenthood on Saturday, we're having a midpoint rally. That's going to be Saturday at 12 p.m., and that's going to have Stephen Carlin there. and he's actually the director for all of the American campaign for 40 Days for Life. So again, we're going to have a prayer vigil out there from about 12 to 1. And that's something if it's your first time, you haven't done this before, and you just want to kind of see how it is, that's a great opportunity to get out there and just meet other pro-life, pro-Christians that have the same message. With that being said, it's going to be a great opportunity just to really see the power that is working out there.
So it's a rally, a prayer rally this Saturday, the 12th of October at the Planned Parenthood in Plano it's actually 600 North Central Expressway. So you probably drive by it, folks, if you're, living in the area and don't even know there's a Planned Parenthood there. You will on Saturday because there'll be people out there, won't there, Chris?
Yes. And my recommendation, we are able to park just down the street at 500 North Central Expressway. So if you are coming, park there and just walk on down to the Planned Parenthood, and it's going to be a powerful message.
Wow. I'm glad. This is perfect. I had no idea until this morning, and I saw this, that you had a rally this week. So I'm glad you came on with me today, and I encourage folks to go. In fact, I'm trying to look at my Saturday to see if I can go. But I wanted to bring up this article that I saw, Chris, and we don't have much time before the break, but afterwards we can continue. Teen Vogue tells girls that abortion is popular, and there's a new article that claims abortions are popular. It uses the word popular. It's kind of a weird word to use. But the polls show that actually abortion is less and less supported especially by young people. And to use that word popular, let's see, let me get one of the quotes out of here, and then we can talk about it after the break. But they say, the Teen Vogue article says, the truth is, though abortion is largely condoned, one could even say abortion is popular. And while abortion may become more divisive when you divide into party identification, many other societal markers show that the medical procedure and the freedom it allows remain popular issues. So this is what I see sometimes pro-abortion folks do. They try to make abortion a political issue, saying because of or a religious issue, because of your religion. But this is not a political issue. This is an issue of life and death, isn't it, Chris?
It is. I would say that it is an issue of life and death. It doesn't matter if what political, if you're a Democrat or Republican. It's something that, looking at it, it's the sanctity of life. When an individual is born, they have their complete DNA. They have all the organs when they're born that they need to grow up and survive. So it just needs the time to get bigger. So with that being said, I really see this article that they're trying to paint this issue as they're really trying to mold it so our next generation will accept it, so they could still keep this alive. And it's really sad.
It is sad. If you have anything to do with it, Chris, that's not going to happen. We'll be back and discuss this more after this.
We live in a digital generation. Point of View is reaching this often overly plugged-in generation with truth. You can keep up with us 24 hours a day using your phone, your tablet, your laptop, or your desktop. Search for the Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, where you can keep up with today's issues, learn about current and upcoming guests by liking us on Facebook. Also, follow us on Twitter. Our handle is @PointOfViewRTS. That stands for Point of View Radio Talk Show. Learn, interact, make a difference with Point of View using new media. And here's one way you can make a big difference. Help us increase our reach by spreading the word among your friends. Share a Facebook post. Tag us in a tweet. With enough joining us to plant seeds, we'll see a tremendous harvest. Come on, it only takes a minute. Search for Point of View Radio Talk Show on Facebook, @Point of View RTS on Twitter, and subscribe to the Point of View Radio Talk Show channel on YouTube. Learn, interact, share. The Point of View Radio Talk Show. Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
My guest is Christopher Towne. He is ambassador for Plano and Collin County for 40 Days for Life. We're talking about this Teen Vogue article that says abortion is popular and the media needs to report it as such. But when you look at the numbers, there was some Gallup polling in June, and this said that 60% of Americans take a pro-life position on abortion. Among that, 21% want all abortion illegal. 39% want most abortions illegal. That 60% figure is the highest percentage since 2009. And a dramatic rise in pro-life attitudes since last year when Gallup said 53%. It was 53% instead of 60% who were pro-life. So, I mean, we're looking like the majorities are getting bigger who support the sanctity of human life. Correct, Chris?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And just like before, if you look at science, I mean, science has really shown us we could now have pictures really looking at the baby at any time of the pregnancy and just seeing the development of that. And I think when people actually take the time and go out and look at those pictures, look at what a child looks like at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, they realize that this is a life. It is separate from the mother. It's something that we need to cherish and we need to take care of.
Do you think that's been the primary driver behind these numbers?
I would have to say that's significant. I think the rise with social media, we're able to get that message out more, and then really people see that and they see, well, you know what, maybe this isn't what I've been told over the last, couple of decades. Maybe there is something more to this, and it's allowing people to think. And really, it's the same thing with 40 Days. It's getting out into our community and really showing our community in a peaceful way on how this is something that we need to take another look at. We need to reevaluate our opinion.
Yeah. So here's another development that's taken place. We talked about this at length yesterday on the program, but I posted an article on it, and really the news is the Supreme Court agreed to review the Louisiana abortion case. And Chris, the angle I want to take with you is a lot of times they'll say, well, you only want to save babies. You don't care about the mothers. These mothers are in terrible situations. When they find themselves pregnant, many feel very desperate. They don't think they can take care of the baby, so you don't care. And this law that was passed in Louisiana, it was also pretty much the same law was passed in Texas, but it was not upheld in the courts. But this is sort of the same language. It's just that we've got a different state, number one, and also a different Supreme Court, and they're going to look at it. And what it does is it requires the doctors performing abortions, if you want to call them doctors, to have admitting privileges at a nearby hospital within 30 miles. That law was, as I said, declared unconstitutional when it was passed in Texas. And in 2016, the Supreme Court did not think that it passed muster, but it's going back there. So, number one, talk about the care for mothers that this implies.
Well, I would like to just really start off with that is that individuals don't think that there's those resources out there to help mothers, really to take care of them. And really, when I'm diving into the pro-life community and getting into it, I couldn't believe how much help is out there if individuals really want to find it. If you look at your Catholic pro-life community, they offer the ability for mothers to have a place to stay if they don't have one while they're having that baby. There's adoption too. There's many adoption agencies out there that would help you find an adequate family that you could even pick. And with that, they would even pay for the time the time and the doctor bills to have that baby. So I mean, just the fact that there are so many options out there, I think really as us as a society, we don't talk about that because there are so many other ways that people could go out there, and those resources are out there, and And it's really for those individuals just to, help them and help them through this process.
This weekend I was at a conference and I saw a friend who I've had on the radio before several times, and she heads up the Silent No More Awareness campaign. And it's women who have had abortions over the past decades since Roe, and coming out publicly and stating that this abortion actually hurt them and ways in which it has hurt them. I mean, perhaps it ruined their marriage, perhaps it ruined their fertility, or they had a health issue, or they, because of just the sadness or guilt, they began substance abuse of some sort. There's all sorts of ways in which abortion hurts women, not to mention the danger of the actual procedure. So, it's not just about the baby. That's important enough just if that's all it was, but it's also about the women.
Yeah, and with that, there's a lot of agencies out there. If you're going through, or if you've had an abortion and you're going through just kind of the issues of recovering from that, you could go to Clear Options in Allen, and they will be able to hook you up with some counseling, or just whatever you need to help get past that traumatic incident. And really, with Clear Options, if you're
Is it Clear Options? Is that the name of them? Name of it?
Oh, Real Options.
Real Options for Women?
Yeah, Real Options for Women. I'm sorry about that.
That's okay. I knew them because I used to, actually know the director, and it's a wonderful pregnancy resource center.
Yes, and really, if you're thinking about it, or if you have an unplanned pregnancy, before heading off to, Planned Parenthood, go ahead and check them out, because with that being said, they have a lot of options, and they could get you connected to what you need to really help decide to keep that baby for life, or if you want to give it up for adoption, or whatever you might want to do. They have all the resources there to just set you up for success.
Well, thank you for bringing that up. And really, folks that are not in the Dallas, Texas area, there are those kinds of centers everywhere. So there is help for you if you are facing this, or if you know someone who is. And, you have to go through the birth process. Maybe some people don't want to do that. But once that's done, you can bless someone else by putting your baby out for adoption. If you can't raise the baby, you can do so many things. And there are some pregnancy centers that provide a lot of material needs and baby needs and things like that. And if you want to raise the child yourself, there's help for that too. There's a lot of help. I mean, we're about life, and these babies get people excited. We're all excited about babies. And Chris, you mentioned the technology, and now they'll show you their sonogram of their child, and the sonography is so good that you can see whether the baby looks like your family practically. So, I do think that that's a big reason why the country is becoming more pro-life.
I would agree with you. I think it's a blessing that we're at this stage, and we can see that type of stuff in the womb.
All right, I just have a couple minutes before the break and have to let you go. But talk about 40 Days for Life, because we've got people listening who might want to get involved, who've never heard of it. How can they get involved, even if they're not in Dallas, Plano? How can they get involved, and talk about your rally on Saturday?
Yeah, so again, with that, if you're not in the Dallas, Plano area, you can log on to 40daysforlife.com, and they will show you the closest campaign that's going on in your area. If you want to go to the Plano one, you would just go ahead and log on to 40daysforlife.com/Plano, and that will put you to the local campaign for that. Again, with that being said, would love to see everybody out there on Saturday. It's going to be a fun and fantastic event. One of the things that I really love about 40 Days for Life is it's a peaceful prayer visual. So you're not going to be out there seeing some crazy signs. It's going to be signs that ask our community to pray to end abortion. And I think that's the biggest thing, is showing Christ's love. And this whole event is making sure that, we're doing it in a way that will impact people to just really think about it and not put them off.
How long does 40 Days for Life last? When's it done?
So it's 40 days, and it started September 25th, and it's going to end November 3rd, and that's every every campaign throughout the country. And then also in the springtime, we will have another campaign that will kick off, I want to say, in the April timeframe.
Okay, great. Well, we'll keep on reminding our listeners about these things. Thank you for joining me today, Chris, and for the work that you do.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. You have a great day.
You too. Ladies and gentlemen, that's 40 Days for Life, and wherever you are, you can find out about it. He gave you some websites to do so. You can also go to pointofview.net, and you'll be able to find Chris's picture and click through to 40 Days for Life. So please do that, and stay with us, because we're going to continue on this issue of the sanctity of human life, and a few other things have also come up with regard to that. So you don't want to miss it. Stay with us. We got more of Point of View.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Over the last 5 episodes, we've been winding our way through the Supreme Court's decision in First Liberty's case, the American Legion versus AHA. Before we move on to other areas of religious liberty, let's tie the whole thing together. It's undeniable that the American Legion is a landmark decision. The days of activist courts catering to the offense of those who would illegitimately weaponize the First Amendment's Establishment Clause to attack religious symbols on public land are over. Not only is the Peace Cross safe from destruction, so are the hundreds of war memorials honoring veterans across the country. Our founders would have been appalled at attempts by activists to purge the landscape of religious symbols in our country. We're religious people living in a diverse society. None of us should be surprised at the presence of religious symbols interspersed with secular ones in the public square. Quite simply, Americans need no longer fear reprisals against the display of the Ten Commandments, a nativity scene, or the national motto on government property. So it is fitting that a memorial to the men who died in the war to end all wars now ends the war to end all memorials with religious shapes or symbols. Thanks to the efforts of the American Legion and some good lawyering at First Liberty Institute, today we have more freedom than we did just a few weeks ago. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Our national motto, "In God We Trust," is under attack. Radicals want it off police cars, money, and more. Support our national motto by going to firstliberty.org/decal to ask for your attractive In God We Trust window cling from First Liberty. Help more Americans remember that God is the foundation for America. Request your free In God We Trust window cling at firstliberty.org/decal.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're talking about abortion, and since we are in the state of Texas, this is such an interesting development that's taking place across the state, actually in small-town Texas. Certain cities and towns are actually outlawing abortion. They're actually saying that their city is a sanctuary city for the unborn. So that's the movement that's spreading across the nation. It's a really great movement. And Texas Right to Life has been part of this. That was Chris Towne's organization, who I just talked with. But there have just been some of these states that have done this. So this is a news report from, let's see, what publication is it? I don't even know, but I think it's Life News. Yes, it's Life News. The sixth Texas city has banned abortion, declaring itself a sanctuary city for the unborn, and that city is Gilmer. Their city council voted 4-1 in favor of an ordinance declaring their city to be a sanctuary for unborn babies. The ordinance prohibits abortions and bans abortion facilities from opening within the city limits. The other cities are Tinaja, Wascom, Omaha, Naples, and Joaquin, all in Texas. Gilmer's the largest one yet. Their population is about 5,000, according to Texas Right to Life. And Mark Lee Dixon is director of East Texas Right to Life. He is a leading advocate of this development, this trend of having cities that are sanctuary cities from abortion. Now, they don't ban, well, most of them, they have different laws in each city. Some will ban emergency contraception, the morning after pill, because it works as an abortifacient most of the time. And it would cause an early abortion. So some cities actually are banning that, but others are not banning that. Still, they take into account that the U.S. Supreme Court actually, in Roe versus Wade, took away the power of state and local governments to protect unborn babies. But what they're doing is laying the groundwork in case Roe versus Wade is overturned. Because Texas has done this, or different cities have done this, it's taken it down to the grassroots, and it's solidifying the idea, when you add that to all the pro-life laws in the state of Texas, that once Roe is overturned, which it could be, in the very near future it could be, then it goes back to the states, and Texas will then be really in a position to make itself a very pro-life state. And other states, I don't know the situation in other states. That's what's going on here. But there's one of the city council guys told Life News that's kind of the idea of this. He said, despite some things that are being said, the Gilmer Ordinance is enforceable. It has a public enforcement mechanism and a private enforcement mechanism. The public enforcement mechanism is about future enforcement. So the penalty would only be enforced when there's a penalty of $2,000 per abortion, which could only be enforced after Roe versus Wade is overturned. But the city itself, I don't think they're going to permit any abortion clinics if anybody would want to build one there. So he said, in other words, if you break the law today, you could be penalized for that crime years from now. So you're setting yourself up for a penalty later. The private enforcement mechanism does not have to wait upon overturning Roe versus Wade, though, and it's in effect immediately. And this is about private lawsuits. So you could actually have lawsuits when a child is killed by abortion. The family can sue the abortionist and then let that play out in the courts. So great, very interesting. If you want to weigh in on that, you can. I wanted to remind you of my question that I would love to get some answers from listeners on. It's, do celebrity endorsements affect who you support in elections? So do you care what, for instance, Scarlett Johansson says? She supports Elizabeth Warren. And Tom Hanks is behind Joe Biden, and Miley Cyrus is supporting Bernie Sanders, and on and on. Does that make you want to vote for those candidates or not want to vote for them, or does it matter to you, and why? And we'll talk about it more later in the program, but I just wanted to ask the question of our listeners. Maybe I'll take a little tally if anybody wants to call in and give us an answer on that. The number is 800-351-1212. One more city, the city of Omaha, Texas. Not Omaha, Nebraska, Omaha, Texas. On September 9th, they passed an ordinance, and their city council is mostly women, so it's not a man thing. And then the city of Naples quickly followed suit the same day in a 5-1 vote. And it says, the text of their law says, unborn babies are the most innocent among us and deserve equal protection under the law as any other member of our American posterity is defined in the U.S. Constitution. I like that. That's good. That was a majority female. Omaha City Council passed it on the heels of, there was an all-white, all-male city council in Wascom. So people were critiquing that, and that was the response. And this is playing out here. So it's a good development. One more piece of information on the sanctity of human life, a little piece of news. This came out from an organization called the American College of Pediatricians. And they're much more conservative than some of the other groups, like, let's see. the AAPLOG, which is American College of Obstetricians and Gynecologists, and the Society of Family Planning, they talk about the killing of the unborn child. They don't use that terminology, but they talk about the necessity of abortion to save mothers, and they really camp out on that a lot. But this press release that came out from Quentin Van Meter, who is the president of the American College of Pediatricians, also the Christian Medical and Dental Associations, these two organizations say killing unborn child is never necessary to save mothers. So that's sort of a red herring when the medical community says that. Dr. Michelle Cretella, who we've had on this program before, she's executive director of this organization, and she said that most of the time when there is a procedure where you have to deliver the baby to save the mother's life, they call it a separation procedure. And really, it tries to save both the mother and the child. So to have an abortion to save the mother's life, it just never happens. She said an abortion, which the general public understands to mean elective abortion, intends to deliver a dead baby every single time. That's why a baby born alive after an elective abortion is called a failed abortion. But this separation is what is usually done. For instance, the mother has preeclampsia and her blood pressure is going sky high, and you've got to prevent a stroke or whatever. And often that's very late term, and the baby is delivered early. I've seen that happen many times. A lot of times those babies are preemies, but we have so much that can help preemies now. Really, babies born very early. So this is what is done in medical science. So it's kind of not a great argument to say that we support abortion to save the life of the mother. I mean, they put it in the laws, but it's so rare that would actually happen. So I just wanted to kind of clear that myth up. There are so many myths out there with regard to abortion that, it's kind of good to tell the truth every once in a while. Well, next up, first of all, I'm going to describe to you what's going on at the Supreme Court today. It's a very interesting case that could serve to redefine the word sex to also mean sexual orientation and gender identity, or it could actually, on the positive side, it could set that word sex, defined as it traditionally always has been, male and female. That's a big issue at stake at the U.S. Supreme Court today. And so we're going to talk about that a little bit after the break. Our friends at Alliance Defending Freedom are actually arguing before the high court. And it's a different court. They could have argued before a much different court on this issue. We're a little bit sanguine about the results, but it will be fun to hear how the justices reacted and about their questions. And we'll do that on Friday. Also, we're going to talk about Agenda 2, which is a great movie about the left and how they're trying to bring America down. We'll talk about that with Curtis Bowers.
When you gift a point of view, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dice would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kirby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penna Dexter and Kirby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy, but if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Join the Truth Team and boldly stand for truth in a world of lies, distortion, and information manipulation. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
I I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging. Apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
Thank you very much for joining us, ladies and gentlemen, for Point of View. We've got some important topics and guests today on the program, and one of them, a guest that will be joining us in a few minutes, is Curtis Bowers. He's made a movie. He makes these awesome movies about trends and things that are happening and warnings. And this one's called Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit. I interviewed him a few years ago on Agenda, Grinding America Down, and it's along the same theme with a lot of new information, really how the left is trying to bring this nation down, why the deep state is involved in that, and how important are the 2020 elections in the survival of America. So that will be coming up in the next segment. And you really will want to join us for that. We've got a trailer for the movie already up on the website, so you can check that out at pointofview.net. And they are meeting. He is actually going to be a speaker for a meeting tonight. It's going to take place at the University Park Library at 6:15. It's being put on by a couple of great organizations. Dallas Eagle Forum is one of them, and the Liberty Forum. So we'll talk more about that. And then later in the program, Wesley Smith is going to join me, and he watches bioethics in this country and really to try to keep it accountable. And there are so many areas which it deviates off of that. And right now there's a story. It's out of California, and a Catholic hospital is actually going to be penalized. A lawsuit is going forward against it for refusing to do a hysterectomy on a transgender. So really doing a hysterectomy on a woman who's decided to become a man. And Catholic hospitals don't like to do anything that violates the sanctity of human life, but they may be forced to or close. So we'll talk about that with Wesley Smith. And I do want to mention the case that's, I don't know what time the arguments were, but today on a case at the U.S. Supreme Court. And the case really asks whether Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, which bans employment discrimination on the basis of sex, and that was hard won by the feminist movement, whether that extends to discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation or transgender status. And it's kind of an odd legal argument. This is according to Ryan Anderson at the Heritage Foundation. He said because it refers to our status as male. That law refers to male and female. What this court is going to look at is now, can we base all of these rights on who someone's attracted to or who they think they are that day? Progressive activists, says Ryan Anderson, have been trying for the past 40 years to get Congress to pass laws that would add sexual orientation and gender identity to sort of as protected classes under civil rights laws. They haven't been able to do so. The Congress has not been willing to vote for that. It's not popular among the American people. Their attempts to work through the legislative process failed. So guess what? Where they've taken it, to the court. That's where it is now. They failed there for the most part until April 2017. That was the first time ever that a federal appellate court ruled against the Civil Rights Act. Ruled that the Civil Rights Act prohibits employment discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And then, of course, as we all know, President Obama was forcing schools and public entities to base their open facilities, bathrooms and things like that, on someone's gender identity, not their gender. And once Trump came in, he reversed that. These are all executive policies. But the courts are ruling on this because the legislatures and the Congress has not made it clear. And so until Congress does change the Civil Rights Act of 1964, we should go forward and base everything on sex. So bathrooms can be men's room and women's room. Locker rooms can be for men and women. Track teams can be for men and for women. And transgenders would have to comply based on their biological sex, not their gender identity. So there is so much at stake in this case. And I'm glad that it's being brought. The story is interesting, too, because it's a funeral home in, let's see if I can find what state that's in. I think it's in Michigan. Yeah. Ryan Anderson says these oral arguments center on whether the ban on sex discrimination extends to discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation and transgender status. And this case, it's a case for an employee at a funeral home who was named Amy and now is named Anthony. She worked there for 6 years as Amy, and then she announced to her employers at the Harris Funeral Home that she was now going to be Anthony and dress as a man. And they thought it through, and they had lots of reasons. For instance, their bathrooms, their clients who are grieving, who may have buried, for instance, Grandma a few years ago, and Amy was a woman, and now they're coming back to bury Grandpa, and Amy's a man. And just to add that to the equation was not something this funeral home was willing to do. So this went to the EEOC, and the Obama administration was actually on the side of the employee, defending the right for that employee to keep his job and going against the employer who said that they did not want this kind of thing going on at their funeral home. Once Trump came in, the administration actually changed the side that it was on. Its briefs, the briefs are actually supporting the funeral home's rights to fire this employee based on the sexual transition. And so that's good, but the ACLU still took up the mantle, and the suit is going on, and it's gone all the way to the Supreme Court. And that's what's being argued today. And so it's got huge repercussions, not only for the bathrooms and the public facilities, but really extending to sports teams. And really a lot of the issues that the feminists have fought for would be, they would just lose so many of their gains, because you're almost erasing the idea of a woman now if a man can be a woman in so many of these areas. So that's what's going on today at the U.S. Supreme Court. It's going to be something we'll continue to talk about. We may bring it up again on Friday on our weekend edition. But I do have a call. Since I've been asking for calls, let me take one. Can I take this one yet, Steve, or not? I can't take it yet. Oh, it's not quite ready for me. Sometimes I jump the gun on the phone calls. But I will tell you the question that I've asked, and you can call in on this throughout the show. And I will I'll break into whatever interview I'm doing to answer, because I want to know, do celebrity endorsements affect who you support as a candidate? And do they help you? Do they hurt you? If for instance, the actress Scarlett Johansson is endorsing Elizabeth Warren, does her doing that make it more likely that you would support Elizabeth Warren, or less likely, or do you even care? I just want to kind of know that. And I guess in this segment we won't be able to take that call, but we'll take it a little bit later. And I want you to stay with us, though, because you're going to want to hear about this documentary that Curtis Bowers has made. It's called Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit. And it's an expose of the communist, socialist, and progressive attempt to take over America. Stay with us. You will not want to miss him. We'll be back.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
So many Christians around the world are facing religious persecution. That's why I was encouraged by President Trump's speech at the UN meeting on religious freedom. Vice President Mike Pence introduced the president. That should give you some indication of how serious the current administration takes this issue. A week ago, I interviewed Gary Bauer about the speech on my radio program. You can find out more at his American Values website. Here are just a few of the significant comments by the president. He said the United States is founded on the principle that our rights do not come from government, they come from God. The president added, our founders understood that no right is more fundamental to a peaceful, prosperous, and virtuous society than the right to follow one's religious convictions. He declared with one clear voice that the United States of America calls on the nations of the world to end religious persecution. He also added that protecting religious freedom was one of the highest priorities, since it is estimated that 11 Christians are killed every day for following the teachings of Christ. He explained that the U.S. was forming a coalition of U.S. businesses for the protection of religious freedom, and he ended by asking every nation to join in this urgent moral duty. He added, we ask the governments of the world to honor the eternal right of every person to follow their conscience, live by their faith, and give glory to God. The United States has a vital role in this critical mission. Perhaps you can see why I thought this was an important speech that was nearly ignored by the mainstream media. In fact, one CNN headline dismissed the speech by pointing out that his speech kept him from attending the UN Climate Summit that day. We must pray for the persecuted church, and we should support any leader that focuses our attention on the plight of Christians around the world. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're so glad you're with us for Point of View today. I've got an interesting guest, a talented man who has done great services for America by making documentaries that help us to understand what's really going on. His name is Curtis Bowers. And Curtis Bowers, he's been with me before on his movie Agenda, Grinding America Down. He is the father of 9, also a speaker and businessman. He was a state representative in the Idaho legislature, and he also operated some restaurants. And then he produced this movie, which won a grand prize, and I interviewed him on this. I can't remember what year that was, but Curtis, thank you so much for joining me.
You're welcome. Glad to be back.
I'm glad you're here, and you had Agenda Grinding America Down, which was absolutely wonderful in its information and warnings. But now you've made Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit. Did you do it because there was more information or because more has happened since?
Kind of both reasons. Agenda Grinding America Down kind of goes through the history of how we've gotten to where we are. And each day seems to get more and more relevant to where we're heading. And the second film, Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit, it goes more into a lot of the current issues right now that they're using to try to just finish America off, like the environmental movement and things like that, that are they're just causes and movements that really aren't what they claim to be about.
So I know that you're speaking at an event tonight at the University Park Library that's put on by our friends at Eagle Forum, Dallas Eagle Forum, and also Liberty Forum. And I see the topic is understanding the deep state and the importance of 2020. Do you think that Does this election make a big difference in the agenda that you talk about in your movie?
Well, it is. I mean, that's the reason why the left has come unglued over Donald Trump is because he is not part of this elitist system that, whether it was Republicans or Democrats over the last 100 years, they were all marching generally in the same direction. Ronald Reagan was an exception to that, and that's why they hated him too. But, the Bushes, the Clintons, the Obamas, they're all buddies. They all have relatively the same agenda, but they come at it from different angles. So, the importance of this election is it can't be overstated, and that will probably be true of every election the rest of our life, because we see the other side's not pretending anymore. If you watch the Democratic presidential debates, you hear what they're talking about now. They used to act like, oh, no, we're not socialists. Oh, no, we're not for that or this or whatever. But now they're openly saying, no, that is what we are for, and we will take your wealth, and we will redistribute it the way we want, and we will control things. And so the reality, if you study history, you know where that heads. And every time it's been tried, it has failed, and it's made the very people it was supposed to help suffer, and that's why we have to stand against it.
Curtis, I was watching the trailer, and by the way, ladies and gentlemen, we posted the trailer for Agenda 2 at pointofview.net, so you can see what's there. And David McIlvaney, his quote, I wrote it down because I thought this was so indicative of what's going on right now. When people are afraid, they ask the government to do more, not less. And in so many areas, I see, like even watching the Democrat candidates debate, they're trying to make you afraid. They're trying to amplify things to make them a crisis. And then that means that we're going to ask for bigger government. We're going to ask for more law enforcement or whatever because we're scared.
That's right. That's right. No, fear is an incredible weapon when it's used by those that are evil to persuade the population to do what they want them to do. But it's so wrong to do that, to terrify our young people that we've got 11 years and it's all over is so evil when that is not the truth at any level. The world today is 1,000 times cleaner than it was 100 years ago. We're going in the right direction on everything, but to tell that to our young people so their suicide rates have doubled in the last 20 years and things like that is really, it needs to be exposed as well. But that's what they do on every issue. It's a crisis. The economy is doing fantastic. Unemployment's the lowest it's been in history, on, and they're making everyone fearful that they can't make it, and they have to have big government, and they have to have the rich people's money to succeed, and they have to have a free education, and they have to have free health care, and they're being lied to because none of that is true. We all that just grew up in the generation before them didn't have any of that, and we worked hard and made all those things happen, and that's what gave us our character. And that's what allowed us to then be able to do things even when we don't want to do them just because they're the right thing. And they're trying to rob them of the experience of learning to be a disciplined, self-controlled person that can be so successful in life in whatever they choose to be, but have learned those traits along the way because it's not super easy and it's not supposed to be.
Well, Curtis, I mean, sometimes I wonder about the gullibility of a large sector of the American population because, as you mentioned, there's this talking down of the economy that goes on. I've been watching some of the candidates do that. And, you look at the economy, you look at unemployment numbers. This last Friday, it came out like the lowest in 60 years, and under minorities, it's the lowest ever for certain minorities. So unemployment's good. The economy's good. Even wages are going up now. So things are improving and positive, and yet they try to talk up a crisis. And I look at it, and I know enough to know that it's not true. But some people look at it, and I don't know why they can't just read a newspaper. I guess it's because the media is in cahoots with the left too. But I can't understand how people can believe this stuff sometimes.
Well, I think, again, when you're in a state of fear, you're not looking at things rationally. A lot of times you're just so fearful. Well, yeah, do whatever. We need to. And so that's why they keep it always at an emotional level. It never gets to an intellectual level just like Al Gore, the debate's over. No, the debate never happened because they know they can't have a debate because they have no facts. They have to use the emotion of, we have 12 years and we're all dead if we don't do something. And and what's happened, though, is they have been manipulating our young people since they were in pre-K at 3 years old into being fearful and to being emotional and to being illogical. They haven't been taught logic and reason and things like that. So they're just sitting ducks for this type of brainwashing and propaganda. And it's terrible to see it when you realize that these people are so evil, they will even abuse our children to get what they want. And that's why we've got to reach out to young people, the millennial generation, and those around us, and start educating them on what is going on and why it's going on, and then the things we need to be doing to make a difference.
So when you talk about children that are really young, a lot of times they are actually taught things about the environment that aren't true. And so I saw in the movie that really sustainability is one of the big marketing tools, probably the primary one, that is demanding power in order to take care of a crisis that is pretty much manufactured, and that's climate change, global warming.
Right. Exactly. And in the second movie, Masters of Deceit, I interviewed Dr. Patrick Moore. Now, Dr. Patrick Moore is the co-founder of Greenpeace. So back in the early 70s, he is into the environment. And when I was interviewing him, I said, Dr. Moore, why did you have to leave your own group that you started? And he said, because in the 80s, the Marxists came in and took it over, and all they wanted to use the environmental movement for was to destroy world capitalism. And he goes, I'm for doing real things that really do help the environment, like managing our forests. And so I had to leave that group. And he said, the things they're pushing as far that are sustainable, all these things, they literally are things that are hurting the environment, not helping it. And that's the type of lies we have to expose.
After the break, I'm going to ask you about your talk tonight, about understanding the deep state and the importance of 2020. We're all looking right now at the impeachment talk, and I think a lot of that has to do with deep state actors in intelligence, in the intelligence community and other places. And so, they're sort of in there, and they are at least being used if they're not pushing an agenda that's destructive and is going toward impeachment. So I'm going to ask you about that after the break. But I do want to mention, because my friends at Dallas Eagle Forum and also Liberty Forum have this joint meeting going on tonight, 615 University Park Library, 8383 Preston Center. And that's in Dallas. And you can go and hear this, and it's open. My friends tell me that you can just show up and hear all about this agenda from Curtis Bauer. So you don't want to miss that. If you can at all possibly go, we wanted to let you know about that. And next up, I'm going to ask that question, and then we're going to just talk about, the manipulation of the evangelical church as part of this movie, Agenda 2. And that struck my curiosity, and you might want to hear about it too, so stay with us.
The first casualty in war is truth. Maybe that helps you understand what's happening in America right now. Thankfully, it's not a war with bullets, but there is a war for control. Control of the country and control of your pocketbook. Truth is under fire, but you can help turn the tide by supporting truth. Join the Truth Team at Point of View Radio. Learn how you can make a difference at pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Don't let truth become a casualty on your watch. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151.
So what would you do with an extra $500 a month in your budget? Pay off loans, save it, do something fun? Well, it's something you may need to think about if you become a member of MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry, and it works. You can save big time on your healthcare costs, and you don't have to pay for things you don't believe in either. Find out more. Call 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE-40. 855-SHARE-40.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
My guest is Curtis Bowers, a Christian filmmaker, and his newest movie, Agenda 2, Masters of Deceit. This is what Ted Baer, Movie Guide, says about it. He says, Agenda is the most powerful expose of the communist, socialist, progressive attempt to take over America produced so far. And one thing I saw in the trailer that teased this movie and this idea that the goal of the left and the progressives, or maybe the result of this takeover, would be, Curtis, to eliminate 6.5 billion people. Explain that.
Well, the environmentalists, all of the top ones, say that the Earth can't sustain a population above 500 million, and several of the groups say it's above 200 million. Well, we have a little over 7 billion people on the planet today, and they sincerely believe 6.5 billion people need to go to keep things. If they want workforce sustainability, that's what they need to do. Well, there's no way to reduce the population like that without doing something horrendous. Even wars would have a hard time doing that, or plagues, or what. I mean, So it's a mentality where human beings have no value. And you'll find in every collective philosophy, every collective mindset, from Marxism to any kind of variety of socialism, when you try to pursue the collective, the individual becomes worthless. When you pursue the good of the many and you believe the good of the many outweigh the good of the few, if you believe that, that's what Marxism is. That's all it is. But when it's implemented, it means abuse and the slaughter of the individual because they have no value whatsoever in the collective.
You know, this really shows us how far apart the systems are, because today we're looking, most nations in the West especially are looking at the problem of lower birth rates, lowering the next generation is going to be too small to sustain the generation that precedes it in their old age, and that we need people. People are bringing in immigrants to do the work because there aren't enough people to fill the jobs. I mean, so that's one system, the capitalist system. But the system where the government takes care of everybody, you can sort of see why they want less people to take care of. But they're so divergent. One is so dynamic and life-giving, and one is really a philosophy of death, isn't it?
Yeah, that's all it is. Socialism just creates death in everything, in family, in society, in economics. Everything that it touches, it destroys. And we see that played out over and over again over the last several hundred years of history. Adam Smith said, you can never have a growing economy with declining populations. So there's 115 different countries and territories in the world that are not even just staying stagnant at the 2.1 children per woman that is needed just to stay stagnant, 115 of them. So the whole world is on a suicide mission where the population is going to be declining, which means there's going to be economic depression and everything because we've rejected the blessing of children. And Europe is way ahead of us. They're down about 1.1 and some of the countries to 1.3. So every generation are losing 50% of their population. I know Russia is losing 900,000 people a year are dying that are not being replaced. It's almost 1 million people every year in their population. So it's happening worldwide, and it's unbelievable because the common sense of you have to have children to take care of the old, you have to have children to be productive, to just keep things going is not happening.
Well, you're doing your part with 9 children to advance the population.
That's right.
Curtis, I wanted to ask you about something else. I mean, I have to see the movie. I have to admit I haven't seen it, but I did see the trailer, and there was a lot in there. And one point was how the left is manipulating the evangelical church. I mean, I know there's the liberal denominations and the mainline denominations, and that's one thing. But you said the left is manipulating the evangelical church. Can you tell us how?
Yes. It's been going on for over 100 years, so it's nothing new, but they're getting very close to succeeding in what their plans were. a few of the top members of the Communist Party USA, when Stalin slaughtered all the people he did, 20-some million people in Russia back in the 40s and 50s, it kind of disillusioned them, and they left the Communist Party. One of them had even been one of the founders of the Communist Party USA. Well, the Congress went to interview him back in the early 53, I believe, Dexter Manning, and they said, "What have you all been doing to take us down from within? What's going on?" And the Congress, the Congressional Committee just questioned the question. I read through all those transcripts, and he said, "We have so few members, we realized we needed to be in the places that are most effective to have influence. And our number one objective, ever since the early 1930s, has been to go into the seminaries in this country and get the degrees, and then raise up and be the professors in the seminaries. So we are training the pastors in America, because we know if we can get control of the church, we will have everything." And so that's back then. So that's from the 30s. So it's already been 90 years going on. The mainline denominations, they were able to take over very quickly because they have a hierarchy. So all you got to do is work your way up into the top positions, and then you say, "This is what the denomination is doing." And that's why there's so many that are so liberal today, is because they've been lost for 70 years. They've turned away from the Bible just to do-gooder activities and things like that to make people feel good and look good. But there's no gospel message. There's no salvation. There's no Christ alone, any of that. Well, the evangelical is the last battlefield because it's more independent. It's not a hierarchy. The churches are independent, and they have been pushing this social justice, which was started by a Marxist in the late 1800s, Dr. Walter Rosenbusch, and as a way to capture the energy of the church and use it to push for socialism. And it's already gone through the main lines, but now it's really becoming a big movement inside the evangelical church. The Southern Baptist Convention is just getting ready to go off a cliff here. Over the next 5 to 10 years, they will be completely turned against the gospel, the biblical gospel. I've been studying all the people in that church that are working their way up, and there's still a few decent people at the top, but the people that are coming up to replace them are radical Marxists, and that whole denomination.
Well, they had a resurgence in the seminaries 20-something years ago, which was such a wonderful movement, and we just need to pray for another one if that's the case.
That's what they need, because the people coming up are just, again, it's amazing to see. But when you study their backgrounds and where they were educated and who has been their mentors and things, you go, these are radicals. But that's what's happening. They're pushing social justice is simply socialism packaged for the church. Christian terminologies to make the biblically illiterate people think that the Bible's for socialism, even when it's not at all.
We need to do a lot of education on that issue because, Christians know that they're to be about a lot of good work around the world, but I think that has been co-opted with the social justice movement. And so it's one of those areas where we got to unpack that a lot more. I'm glad that you brought it up.
Yes. Now, when you do gooder stuff around the world, but not in Jesus' name, instead of making him look good, it makes you look good. And that is sin. That is sin.
Absolutely.
That is pride. So that's what's happened to the church, even the evangelical church. Most of their mission trips, they are not sharing the gospel. They're just doing do-gooder things, which makes them feel good and look good to others. But it is not glory. It's not making Jesus look good.
Yeah. We're going to have a lot of people probably. It's too bad we can't keep you and have a discussion with our callers because I think you're going to get some pushback on that. But let me ask you one more thing before I let you go, Curtis. I know that you're going to be at this event tonight, and the topic is the deep state and the election. So what are you going to, just give me a couple of teases for folks that might want to go and attend that meeting tonight.
Well, I'm going to just show the history over the last 150 years, how the deep state, what that is the people that have got control, who they are, have gotten control of Washington, D.C., and why so often our representatives aren't representing us, what has happened. It's been over 150 years, but it's an amazing thing as you see it, that it all makes sense that's there. But even you were talking about the impeachment thing. James Comey and John Brennan, both over the last 12 months, admitted they'd previously been communists, both of them. Now, I mean, the fact that that's not big news when you had the head of the FBI and the head of the CIA both admit, we're not anymore, but we used to be. Well, I know from studying communism the last 15 years and Marxist philosophy, once you're a communist, you're always a communist unless you had a life-changing situation where then you're the most anti-communist, pro-American person you could be. And so, but through the intelligence community, through them hijacking so many other areas, which I'll talk about, you'll see that's why so many things are so anti-American, even though you think, well, why is our State Department always doing things that are not good for America? And then you go, oh, this is why.
It ought to be very interesting. Thank you so much, Curtis, for joining me today. I hope it all goes well tonight, and God bless you.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Over the last 5 episodes, we've been winding our way through the Supreme Court's decision in First Liberty's case, the American Legion versus AHA. Before we move on to other areas of religious liberty, let's tie the whole thing together. It's undeniable that the American Legion is a landmark decision. The days of activist courts catering to the offense of those who would illegitimately weaponize the First Amendment's Establishment Clause to attack religious symbols on public land are over. Not only is the Peace Cross safe from destruction, so are the hundreds of war memorials honoring veterans across the country. Our founders would have been appalled at attempts by activists to purge the landscape of religious symbols in our country. We're religious people living in a diverse society. None of us should be surprised at the presence of religious symbols interspersed with secular ones in the public square. Quite simply, Americans need no longer fear reprisals against the display of the Ten Commandments, a nativity scene, or the national motto on government property. So it is fitting that a memorial to the men who died in the war to end all wars now ends the war to end all memorials with religious shapes or symbols. Thanks to the efforts of the American Legion and some good lawyering at First Liberty Institute, today we have more freedom than we did just a few weeks ago. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Our national motto, "In God We Trust," is under attack. Radicals want it off police cars, money, and more. Support our national motto by going to firstliberty.org/decal to ask for your attractive In God We Trust window cling from First Liberty. Help more Americans remember that God is the foundation for America. Request your free In God We Trust window cling at firstliberty.org/decal.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. We're coming off an interview with Curtis Powers on his movie Agenda 2, and so there's a lot in the movie and a lot of warnings about the left and progressivism and the attempt to take America down. And so I asked one question because I kind of had a question about it when I heard the trailer about the left infusing the evangelical church. And so that answer, I knew this would happen, has provided some questions among our listeners. So we're going to go to one. Let's go to Tim in Ohio. Hi, Tim. Thanks for calling in.
Well, hi. It's glad to hear you. Yeah, my question is too bad that your guest has left. But he says that he thinks that the Southern Baptists is doomed to go the rest of the way the other major denominations in the next 5 years because of our leadership. I just was wondering who he thought, if he had any specific individuals to look out for.
Yeah, I know. I'm almost glad he left. I didn't want him to give out names because I have heard some concerns about certain people in the Southern Baptists that are leaders, but I'm not sure that it's fair to make that indictment of them, because I do think, as I was saying, that we need to unpack what social justice is. Social justice in the way that he defines it is a way to take do-gooders, he was calling it, doing good, and there's lots of efforts by lots of churches around the world doing good things, and he mentioned mission trips and things.
Right.
And mission trips often are really that. I mean, they do something good for a community in need, and they share the gospel. In a lot of times, you'll see Vacation Bible School along with building houses. You'll see providing stoves in South America. Our church does this, and there is much sharing of the gospel that goes along with that, and conversions. So that's not fair. That was not a fair statement, and I don't agree with that. I like what Curtis Bowers is doing with his movie because he's warning us, but I don't think that's fair. I think there's more unpacking that needs to be done of that social justice movement. I do think that there are social justice in itself is getting a definition that's very far to the left. So maybe we don't even want to call these mission trips social justice anymore, if they're going to be labeled as that. But what else do you have to say about this? Because are you a Southern Baptist?
Yes. I'm an alumnus of the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary in Louisville.
Okay.
And
Al Mohler, one of my favorite theologians.
I have a hard time seeing Dr. Mohler and pretty much any of the staff that are there fitting into the category that your guest cited. And right now I belong to an independent church here in the Dayton, Ohio area, because it was the church I thought I should join. I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
Just two weeks ago, we had our annual missions celebration, and we've decided to partner with the country of Ghana over the next 10 years or so to help do development work, to bring missions work to them. I'm trying to put together a proposal here to see if I can find some resources for somebody that would want to fund water resources. For the idea that I've seen a couple of companies that have devices that can extract water from the air and can produce up. The one company said they can produce up to 5,000 gallons a day with their unit, and the guy that was on a few weeks ago, and that's a Christian philanthropist, Freeze, I want to say his last name.
Foster Freeze.
Yeah, he mentioned that he takes efforts for that effort to get water to
okay. Kirby was hosting that day. I didn't hear that interview.
Yeah, the Southern Baptist Convention is, the denomination that does more for international missions than any other denomination I can think of. And like I said, I don't see, at least in Dr. Mohler and company, and even I like what J.D.
Greer.
I like it. I like him. And glad that he is the president of the convention. He got tried by fire, to say the least, here with this abuse problem.
And they're making it a big initiative. I will say, in an organization as big as the Southern Baptist Convention, and one that actually allows all the churches to be autonomous in many ways, and they don't have to answer to a higher power, but they have they have resolutions and standards that filter down. You cannot paint it with that broad brush at all. And there may be some people that have concerns about certain people there. And I'm not going to discount those. I think it's really good to look at your organization and keep it pure. And when they had that conservative resurgence back in the late 80s, it was huge. And it did save the convention. And in many ways, I think it saved the culture, because there's so many Southern Baptists, to say that we're not going to go to the left. We're going to move these seminaries back to biblical truth. And they did that. Now, to always be watchful and to be vigilant is absolutely necessary. And if Curtis wants to call people out, that's great. I'm glad he would be doing that. And we didn't give him enough time to go deeper. And so, maybe we should bring him back and just do that. Although I think we'd have to have some folks to defend their position on it too. You talk to him in advance and see if he'll give you those names so you could invite him. I'm sure we can find the names. It's probably in the movie. I haven't watched the whole movie, as I mentioned.
This movie, is it in theaters now?
It's a documentary, so I don't think it's in theaters, but you can get it. As a matter of fact, you can go to pointofview.net and find out how to get the movie. And also, if anybody lives in the Dallas area and wants to go and hear him speak tonight, you could ask him some questions about this, and that would be interesting. So, that's a possibility too. But listen, I am so glad you called, Tim, because it really kind of there at the end of the interview, I was a little concerned myself. So I'm glad you brought this up and we were able to spend some time on it. Okay. Well, thank you. Thanks. And God bless you. God bless you. Yes. Well, I have to say that I love the Southern Baptist Convention, so I don't want to tar it. I just think that those are a bunch of folks who actually right now they're looking into some other issues that they've had and that have been in the media with regard to abuse, and they've rather than try to cover things over, they're really trying to do something about it. So I say to their credit, they are doing that, and so there's some great leaders there. Well, ladies and gentlemen, stay with us. We got a long break, and then after the break, we're going to talk about another hot button issue, which is the forcing of religious hospitals and healthcare to violate its pro-life, sanctity of human life protecting principles, and it's going into the courts. Wesley Smith is going to join me to do that. Meanwhile, during the break, you might want to go to our website to check out all the guests, their bios, their websites, and our donate button. We would love if you would take advantage of that. We've got a show here that deals with some hard subjects, and we need your support to help keep it going. So we'd ask you to do that. Stay with us.
Hear about MediShare? They have questions, some good ones, like, what is it? Well, MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry. It's not health insurance. It's a different way of doing things, which leads us to this question. Why do so many become MediShare members? Two big reasons. They save a lot. The typical family saves $500 a month, and they feel great about it. With MediShare, you aren't forced to pay for things you don't believe in. Find out more. 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE-40.
It seems we can't get through a day without hearing how science has been corrupted to support political goals. Media entities have sold out truth for the sake of favored narratives. Even some religious groups have abandoned the Bible to support things based on feelings. So who can you trust? Kirby Anderson and the Point of View Truth Team are your source for real news. Learn how you can make a difference by joining the team at pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. In a world of unending fog, Point of View is a shining light. Do your part at pointofview.net/team or 800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
I just want to thank you so much for all the wonderful programming you have. You're just absolutely fantastic.
I've recently started listening to Point of View, and I really found it interesting because of the different subjects you cover. Thank you for that.
I really appreciate everything that you do in keeping us informed.
Thank you, Kirby, for everything that you have been doing. I appreciate all the work that you're doing, advocating for the Word of God. Thank you so much.
Point of view, I think, is absolutely necessary because it's a Christian perspective, a biblical worldview perspective, and receive very current, up-to-date information about what is really going on, week to week in our culture, which is changing so rapidly, and yet it's morally sliding backwards.
Yeah, I'm just, first of all, I thank you guys. Y'all's program is wonderful, and enjoy it every day. I learn so much every time I listen to it.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kirby Anderson. You know, each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Penna Dexter.
We're so glad you're with us here for Point of View. I am Penna Dexter, and the next story is actually a sad one, but indicative of where our culture is going. And this comes out of let's see, I think it's the Daily Signal, where Nicole Russell writes, and I hope I'm saying the right publication, in an age of transgenderism, the right to medically transition is threatening some of the most basic freedoms we've known, such as religious freedom. Consider a recent case out of California where a state appeals court ruled that a transgender man can move forward with a lawsuit suing a Catholic hospital for discrimination. Remember, a transgender man is a biological woman. In April 2017, Evan Minton sued Catholic medical provider Dignity Health after one of its hospitals refused to give her a desired hysterectomy because so doing would have contradicted Catholic teachings against sterilization. A state appeals court, actually, this was not allowed, but a state appeals court reversed the decision and tossed the case back to a lower court. Could pave the way for any person via the court to compel a religious organization to violate its religious convictions. With us to discuss this is Wesley Smith. He's been with us many times. He's among the world's foremost critics of assisted suicide and utilitarian bioethics. And his latest book is The Culture of Death, The Age of Do No Harm Medicine. He's published hundreds of articles, and he appears on television and radio. And Wesley, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you, Penna. One minor correction. It's The Age of Do Harm Medicine.
Oh, yeah. Sorry about that. It is do harm medicine. And, you know, it's tragic. And here now it's also a violation of religious liberty of a Catholic hospital. So just explain exactly the situation out here in California, first of all.
Sure. And that idea of do harm medicine and this story go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. And the continual assault on Catholic hospitals to try to compel them to adhere to a more secularist and utilitarian paradigm in their delivery of health care. So what happened in this particular case, as you summarized in the introduction, is Dignity Health had a hysterectomy scheduled, and the patient called, as I understand it, and basically said, look, the reason I'm doing this hysterectomy is I'm transitioning from a biological female into a male. And Dignity Health, being a Catholic institution, said, well, we're sorry, we can't do that. And they based their rejection on specifically on Catholic moral teaching, and specifically on a couple of directives. I wrote about this in the American Spectator. And let me read these directives to you real quick, because it'll show that they're not actually invidious, meaning they're not aimed at any particular group, but they would apply to any situation in which somebody asks for a healthy organ to be removed. So here's Directive 29. Quote, all persons served by Catholic health care have the right and duty to protect and preserve their bodily and functional integrity. The functional integrity of the person may be sacrificed to maintain the health or life of the person when no other morally permissible means is available. So if a woman had a cancerous uterus, of course, a hysterectomy would be allowed because that would be the best way to protect the health and life of that patient, because there would be a pathology in that organ. And in the situation we're discussing, there was no pathology in that organ, just that the woman who had the organ, the biological woman, didn't want it anymore. The second directive is Directive 53, which basically, I won't read the whole thing, but it forbids actions that sterilize unless, again, quote, there is a serious pathology and a simpler treatment is not available. So in the request to have the hysterectomy as part of a sex transition or whatever we call it, sex change, a healthy organ was going to be removed, violating Catholic moral teaching, as well as a action that would sterilize the patient. Now imagine if a woman came to the hospital and said, look, I identify as a postmenopausal woman. I don't want to have periods anymore. I don't want to be able to get pregnant. Take out my uterus and my ovaries. Well, the hospital would have refused that as well,
right?
For the very same reasons. So, in fact, the hospital was put under tremendous pressure after saying no, and in 3 days it found another hospital for this patient who would perform the surgery, but that wasn't enough. The patient sued based on discrimination based on sexual identity. The trial court said, come on, we've got freedom of religion in this country, and threw it out. But the Court of Appeals reversed and said, we are going to allow this lawsuit to go forward because this violates a law in California, a statute that prevents discrimination, and we don't care about your freedom of religion. The law against discrimination trumps it, and that means, since the court has found that the case can go forward, it's probably not a matter of whether this person will get damages against the hospital, but how much.
Wow, really? Because that's the situation with the courts out there in California, I guess.
Yeah, well, what happened, and they relied on a Supreme Court case. There was a Supreme Court case, 5, 6, 8 years ago, in which a lesbian couple approached a fertility doctor wanting, I believe it was artificial insemination. And this doctor was a Orthodox small O Christian, and she said, look, I just don't think this is right. And she referred that couple to another clinic or another doctor, and they were able to get the service they requested. They sued this doctor, even though she referred them to another doctor, and they won. And the basis of that was the doctor would do artificial insemination for a heterosexual married couple, but would not do it for a homosexual couple. So the claim was, okay, there's an invidious distinction here. It isn't generally the procedure that this doctor was finding objectionable. It was who wanted the procedure. That is not the same thing as the current case. In the current case, the forbidding of these procedures is not based on any specific characteristic of the patient. It's based on whether there's a serious pathology or whether there is going to be a serious health condition that is going to be remedied through this kind of surgery. So what you've taken is a case in which a doctor had a different standard depending on who was asking for the care, and now they said Catholics can't actually have this if it involves a sexual minority. This is really frightening because what's really happening here is a direct assault on medical conscience, and the idea here is to force Catholic institutions, pro-life institutions, pro-life doctors, pro-life nurses, whether it's based on religious belief or whether it's based on the Hippocratic Oath, which forbids abortion and forbids assisted suicide. The idea is to force them out of health care or to force them to adhere to these utilitarian, secularist, progressive cultural agendas.
All right, Wesley Smith is with us. We've got a lot more. We're going to unpack this particular case and the issue at hand after this. Stay with us.
This is Viewpoints with Kirby Anderson.
So many Christians around the world are facing religious persecution. That's why I was encouraged by President Trump's speech at the UN meeting on religious freedom. Vice President Mike Pence introduced the president. That should give you some indication of how serious the current administration takes this issue. A week ago, I interviewed Gary Bauer about the speech on my radio program. You can find out more at his American Values website. Here are just a few of the significant comments by the president. He said the United States is founded on the principle that our rights do not come from government, they come from God. The president added, our founders understood that no right is more fundamental to a peaceful, prosperous, and virtuous society than the right to follow one's religious convictions. He declared with one clear voice that the United States of America calls on the nations of the world to end religious persecution. He also added that protecting religious freedom was one of the highest priorities since it is estimated that 11 Christians are killed every day for following the teachings of Christ. He explained that the U.S. was forming a coalition of U.S. businesses for the protection of religious freedom, and he ended by asking every nation to join in this urgent moral duty. He added, we ask the governments of the world to honor the eternal right of every person to follow their conscience, live by their faith, and give glory to God. The United States has a vital role in this critical mission. Perhaps you can see why I thought this was an important speech that was nearly ignored by the mainstream media. In fact, one CNN headline dismissed the speech by pointing out that his speech kept him from attending the UN Climate Summit that day. We must pray for the persecuted church, and we should support any leader that focuses our attention on the plight of Christians around the world. I'm Kirby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
For more information about issues covered on Viewpoints, visit pointofview.net. Pointofview.net.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Welcome back to Point of View. I'm Penna Dexter, and my guest is Wesley Smith. He's a bioethicist, and we have posted his piece on the topic at hand at pointofview.net. It's out of National Review. Catholic Hospital can be sued for refusing transgender hysterectomy. And this is also crazy, but it's actually being allowed to go forward. But Wesley, did I understand from what you said that this particular person who is suing is getting the hysterectomy elsewhere?
Oh, received it. I mean, this happened.
She already received it.
Yeah.
Okay. So she's already received it. But they're suing to change the system then.
Yeah. And it's this is all a part of a broad attack on religious freedom in the West. I just had a piece just to give you an example of what's going on at National Review. Nevada has passed a law that actually requires caregivers to starve dementia patients to death if that patient wrote an advance medical directive saying that they do not want food and water. Now, this is a huge thing, because in the past people have been able to say, look, I don't want a feeding tube, where you put that in the stomach, because that's a medical treatment.
Right.
But now Nevada has expanded that to say, I don't want food and water if I have dementia, and reach a certain point. And I'm instructing my power of attorney to order food and water. We're talking about spoon feeding. We're talking about basic humane care.
Getting your 3 meals a day.
Right. So let's assume that there's a dementia patient being cared for in a religious nursing home, and who had signed this advance directive, and they say to the nursing home administration and doctors and nurses, do not give her food and water. And the response is, wait a second, she willingly eats. We don't care. She signed this advance directive. You can be doctors and institutions that refuse to comply with advance directives can be sued. Now, imagine if this is Mother Teresa's nursing home, from that order of nuns. It would be completely against and should be against anybody's religion and anybody's morality to starve someone to death who willingly eats. But you could see in the situation we're discussing that the court saying, well, listen, they said in advance directives they didn't want food and water. This is how death-obsessed we are becoming. And this is the danger to traditional morality that we face in this situation. We hear a lot about things like, bakers and cake bakers and florists and so forth. But where this is really going to hit the road is in healthcare, because you're dealing with things such as life and death, as we've discussed. You're dealing with issues such as parents telling doctors to stop their child's normal puberty because the child has been diagnosed with gender dysphoria. That's to me, unethical medical experimentation, regardless of the religious aspect of it, because you don't know what's going to happen to a child over the long term if their normal puberty has been stopped. And we also know that these drugs can cause harm such as bone thinning. So these are the kinds of things, as we are splitting apart as a society in terms of our moral beliefs, unless we agree that there's going to be comity and healthcare professionals can announce ahead of time, look, these are the things I will not do, giving patients the right to not have them as doctors, you're going to not only drive pro-life doctors and traditional Hippocratic doctors out of healthcare, you're going to make sure, and I think this is the point, that young people who would make excellent doctors and excellent nurses and pharmacists never go into these fields because they don't want to be put in that position.
I'm reading from your, it's the death of common sense, for one thing.
Yeah,
but,
no kidding.
You write in the National Review article, the pleading, this is out in California, alleges that Mercy, this hospital, allows doctors to perform hysterectomies as treatment for other conditions, but refused to allow Dr. Dawson to perform the same procedure as treatment for Minton's gender dysphoria. So they're calling the gender dysphoria a health care, sort of like a disease, equating it with other conditions, and that's what they're using to argue this, right?
That's correct. But realize that the hospital's directives that I read in the first segment, it isn't they will not take out anyone's healthy organs for any reason. If there's an illness and the illness can be ameliorated without destroying the healthy organic body function of an organ, that's what they're going to do. That's what the directive says, that they will only take out healthy organs that change the normal function of those body parts when it is necessary to protect the physical health and life of the patient. That's not the case in a person who identifies as the different sex. So what is happening here is, one, and this is what the mainstream medical establishment believes, by the way, that the subjective internal state of a person who's transgendered or has gender dysphoria should be considered the same thing as cancer. Well, that makes no common sense at all, because there's no test for it. There's just the word of the patient. And by the way, a lot of these people, and we should have great empathy for them, a lot of these people, certainly not all, but a lot of people, particularly young people, actually change their minds later on. And if you do these surgeries, you've kind of permanently made it so that if they do have a change of mind, and if they do have a desire to restore themselves in terms of their identity to their biological sex, you may have actually made it so they cannot do so, or that their normal functioning in the biological sex they were born will be impeded.
All right.
And no one should be forced to mutilate somebody, because that's what we're talking about.
That's right. I'm going to talk later after after Wesley Smith has left us about one such case where it's a piece by someone named Sidney Wright. I spent a year as a trans man. Doctors failed me at every turn, and it's really sad. But I want to ask you one other question, Wesley, because today at the Supreme Court there's a case being argued about a funeral home. Where it's the treatment of an employee that decided to transition from female to male, and they're really saying that this is going to go to the definition of sex from the Civil Rights Act, whether
Right.
now we expand that to be sexual orientation and gender identity. If that case goes the right way and protects the definition of sex as male and female, will that help cases like this for religious hospitals and healthcare?
It could. Now, California's was not based on federal law; it was based on state law. But it could. In that case, I haven't been following that case very closely, so people should take what I'm about. I am a lawyer, but people should take what I'm about to say. Let's
with
just
that
say
in mind,
it's not the gospel. Yeah. But as I understand it, the civil rights law says that you cannot discriminate on the basis of sex. Now, when that law was passed, what that meant was male or female. And so what the people who have brought the lawsuit wanted to also mean is sexual identity and sexual orientation. And the government, I believe, is saying, wait a second, if that's what the Congress wants and that's what the Congress should pass, and the Congress has not passed that kind of a law. The Congress has not included sexual identity or sexual orientation in that statute, and that should not be something the courts do. That should be something the Congress does through the normal legislative process. That's what I understand that case is about. It's really not a constitutional question. It's a statutory interpretation question. Now, in California, let's.
I've got about a minute before the break. Can you stay with me a little bit after the break?
Sure.
Good.
Yeah, I think we should talk a little bit about the Religious Freedom Restoration Act and the First Amendment, so people have an understanding of where the general playing field in terms of religious liberty in this country.
Okay. Well, we've got a minute, so you can just sit tight.
The First Amendment.
Well, let me just sit tight, and then after the break, we will answer this and unpack it a little. I don't want it to be too rushed because this is huge, ladies and gentlemen, and we always look at California and what happens out there, and their judges certainly are to the left, but still, we have to get our heads around these threats to religious liberty and the ability of different organizations to operate according to their beliefs and their tenets. And Catholic hospitals, for one, have been in existence for hundreds of years, really, and this would handicap them. I think you'd see them closing. I think you'd almost see the end of Catholic health care and religious health care in the country. So we've got to talk about it. Wesley Smith is my guest, and we will be back after these messages.
When you gift a point of view, does it make a difference? Jeremy Dice would tell you that it does. He grew up listening to Point of View in the back seat of his mom's car, and it helped to shape his thinking.
I had parents that were able to sit across from me at the dinner table after we listened to Marlon Maddox and Kirby Anderson years ago and think through what the scriptures say about these issues of current significance in our lives. That's only possible because Point of View has come along and ministered into my life and made me who I am today. And here I am today defending religious liberty, partly because Marlon Maddox and Penna Dexter and Kirby Anderson were the ones that were pushing me towards all that. They taught me how to think through these issues. They didn't tell me what to think. They taught me how to think.
Each gift you give will change lives. Not every Point of View listener will become a Jeremy, but if they listen for very long, they will be changed. And that will change how they impact and affect the lives of the people around them. So make that decision to change a life today. Join the Truth Team and boldly stand for truth in a world of lies, distortion, and information manipulation. Go to pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. That's 1-800-347-5151.
Point of View will continue after this.
You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again, is Penna Dexter.
I'm glad my guest, Wesley Smith, has been able to stay with me. He is an attorney. He holds the field of bioethics accountable, and he has been watching these things. And his book, his latest, I think this is your latest book, Culture of Life, The Age of Do-Harm Medicine. And wow, this case certainly fits into that category because it's about, in the state of California, a Catholic hospital called Dignity Health. It's actually owned by a company called Dignity Health, is now being sued for refusing to do a hysterectomy on someone who was transitioning to male from female. And, you know, their doctrine holds that you will not sterilize someone, no matter what, and you would not remove a healthy organ, which this would involve. So they're being sued. And Wesley, we were talking about the religious implications of this. You said that you expect this to go against the Catholic hospital in the final analysis, but there are huge religious liberty implications.
Yes, because the Court of Appeals, and realize this is a state question right now and not a federal question. Mm-hmm. It could end up becoming a federal question. I think it should. But the state Court of Appeals has said that the trial judge that threw the case out on religious freedom grounds was wrong, and that this constituted a potential discrimination based on sexual identity. And now the question becomes whether or not the plaintiff bringing the case can prove damages. And so, but I believe once you said, okay, this is discrimination, the question isn't whether the Catholic hospital will be held liable for damages, but how much that might be. In fact, the Court of Appeals even said that waiting the 3-day wait that the patient had before being referred to a hospital that did do the surgery. I mean, the surgery was not denied; it was done, but that acted as an act against the patient's dignity, that there had to be a wait. So when you consider
3 days of retaining her uterus.
Yes, exactly. Or before she could find, or he could find, I don't want to get into pronouns, a hospital willing to do the surgery.
I'm just going to use the biological one.
So it's a real concern. Now, one would say, there's a wonderful quote by a Supreme Court justice from back in the 40s named Justice Frank Murphy, and here's what he wrote. Freedom of speech, freedom of the press, and freedom of religion all have a double aspect, freedom of thought and freedom of action. So what the Court of Appeals in California is saying, you can think anything you want, you just can't act on it. Well, at that point, if people are not allowed to really engage in the free exercise of religion, which is what the First Amendment protects, then basically it's a shriveled sense of you have a right to freedom of worship. So that if a Catholic believes that the communion is the real body and blood of Christ, the government won't interfere with that. Well, what good is that? That's no good at all, because in order for freedom of religion to have any meaning at all, as Justice Murphy put it, you have to be able to act on your faith, and your ability to act on your faith should only be constrained if there's a compelling state interest. And here's the example. When you talk about that, then the secularists will often say, well, does that mean you should allow child sacrifice if you've got a religion that believes in that? Well, of course it doesn't. Because the state would have a compelling interest in protecting children from being killed, as the Aztecs did back, when they were in power in Mexico. No right is absolute, but the freedom of religion, which is one of the first freedoms, and it's in the First Amendment, should only be interfered with if there's a compelling state interest and if there is no lesser way than, say, the law that is passed to protect that compelling state interest. That used to be basically the way the First Amendment was interpreted. Then there was a very bad Supreme Court case about 20 years ago, maybe a little longer, written by Justice Scalia. Unfortunately, it was his worst decision, in my opinion. It was a Indian peyote case where some Native Americans had taken peyote and then had had a bad drug test, and they said, wait a second, we took this drug in the exercise of our Native American religion, and I'm afraid that Scalia looked at it as a drug case instead of a freedom of religion case, because he wrote a decision that said, well, any law of general applicability, even if it infringes on religion, that doesn't violate the First Amendment.
It's caused us problems ever since.
It's caused nothing but problems ever since, because it basically changed First Amendment jurisprudence. So what happened after that is the federal government passed almost unanimously the Religious Freedom Restoration Act. And the Religious Freedom Restoration Act, by statute, basically restored the kind of interpretation that I mentioned previously. It has to be a compelling state interest, and there has to be no lesser way of fulfilling that state interest than the objectionable law that was sued about. That has passed muster in terms of the federal level, but on the state level, it was found to be unconstitutional. And when it was passed through a left-right coalition, when they got back together again to fix whatever the deficiency was, so that it would also apply to the states, the left wing said, we're not having anything to do with this anymore because it impacts on the rights of gay and lesbian people. So now what's happened is, unless a state has a Religious Freedom Restoration Act, which some states do, then you've got this problem of, if it's a law of general applicability, it may not violate the First Amendment. And there's a case on point. In Washington State, there was a Catholic pharmacy that would not dispense certain morning after pills or abortifacient pills. And Planned Parenthood, and this came out in the testimony, worked with the governor to pass a regulation that said there is no right to a conscience rejection of filling any legal prescription.
I remember this case.
Yes, and so the trial judge said, wait a second, that violates the freedom of religion of the owners of this small pharmacy. The Court of Appeal and basically found specifically that the intent of the regulation was to go after this particular pharmacy because they had this Catholic belief. But the Court of Appeal said, no. This is a law of general applicability, even though most pharmacies, of course, would not have an objection to it. Perhaps only certain particular Catholic pharmacies and maybe some other Christian or other religiously owned pharmacists might. But because it was a law of general applicability, even though a law was directed at a particular Catholic pharmacy, then the law passed constitutional muster, and then the Supreme Court refused to take the case. So you can see the problem that you have here. There are going to be many laws passed of general applicability that would only be objectionable to a cross-section of potentially religious believers, and therefore their freedom of action based on the religion is being constrained.
Wow.
It's a very serious situation. I call this social martyrdom. We don't have blood martyrdom in this country for Christians like they do in the Middle East, for example, but there is growing persecution in terms of social martyrdom where Christians and others who have faith-based beliefs are being told they have to choose between their professions, their businesses, and their faith.
Wow. Well, yeah, I think now, you're paying perhaps not with your blood, but with your livelihood.
Exactly.
And we're being squeezed out of public. And, everywhere we can, we have to stand against this. And it's becoming more and more important. And people need to actually be aware. So thank you, Wesley, for joining me today to explain this. And I really appreciate you staying with me a little bit longer. That was absolutely necessary. And I appreciate all the watchdogging you do and the way that you write so well to explain these things. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that's what's happening in California. And actually, the remedy for it, because of the situation in the state, is there really isn't one in this particular case. But we do need to be aware. And we need to be watching these things because there are remedies federally. And since we have courts that are going more our direction, perhaps we will be able to, in the long run, take some measures to stop these things. Well, ladies and gentlemen, first of all, if anybody wanted to answer my question from the beginning of the program, do celebrity endorsements affect who you support? Do you care what actors and actresses say politically, who they support? Does it make you want to support the same people, or does it make you want to run away? You can answer that. Give us a call, 800-351-1212. In the next segment, we can talk about that and more. We'll be back after this.
Welcome to the First Liberty Briefing. I'm Jeremy Dice. Over the last 5 episodes, we've been winding our way through the Supreme Court's decision in First Liberty's case, the American Legion versus AHA. Before we move on to other areas of religious liberty, let's tie the whole thing together. It's undeniable that the American Legion is a landmark decision. The days of activist courts catering to the offense of those who would illegitimately weaponize the First Amendment's Establishment Clause to attack religious symbols on public land are over. Not only is the Peace Cross safe from destruction, so are the hundreds of war memorials honoring veterans across the country. Our founders would have been appalled at attempts by activists to purge the landscape of religious symbols in our country. We're religious people living in a diverse society. None of us should be surprised at the presence of religious symbols interspersed with secular ones in the public square. Quite simply, Americans need no longer fear reprisals against the display of the Ten Commandments, a nativity scene, or the national motto on government property. So it is fitting that a memorial to the men who died in the war to end all wars now ends the war to end all memorials with religious shapes or symbols. Thanks to the efforts of the American Legion and some good lawyering at First Liberty Institute, today we have more freedom than we did just a few weeks ago. To learn how First Liberty is protecting religious liberty for all Americans, visit firstliberty.org.
Our national motto, "In God We Trust," is under attack. Radicals want it off police cars, money, and more. Support our national motto by going to firstliberty.org/decal to ask for your attractive In God We Trust window cling from First Liberty. Help more Americans remember that God is the foundation for America. Request your free In God We Trust window cling at firstliberty.org/decal.
Now, back to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
We're taking your calls on my question. Do celebrity endorsements affect who you support? For instance, actress Scarlett Johansson has endorsed Elizabeth Warren for president in 2020. Tom Hanks lined up behind Joe Biden, and Miley Cyrus is publicly supporting Bernie Sanders. This is an opinion piece by Arthur Brooks that appeared in the Washington Post today. So I just thought I'd ask the question of listeners, and we've kind of allowed people to call in throughout the program, but and the number's 800-351-1212. Does your opinion, does your support of a candidate, is that affected by a celebrity one way or the other? So we can talk about that a little bit later. I do also want to kind of pick back up on the interview we had in the last couple of segments with Wesley Smith, because these treatments for being for transitioning. Not only are they surgical, but the ones that come ahead of the surgeries are usually hormonal, and it's damaging too. I mean, some of it also is irreversible. This is Sydney Wright, who wrote. This is in, I believe, this is the Daily Signal today, or maybe yesterday. Sydney Wright writes, "I can't wrap my head around all that I've done to myself in the last 2 years, much less the quote help that some healthcare professionals have done to me." And she says she's a he now, but she was born a she. 2 years ago, I was a healthy, beautiful girl heading toward high school graduation. Before long, I turned into an overweight, pre-diabetic nightmare of a transgender man. And so Sydney Wright goes through what happened, how she came to the point where really she asked for treatment to become a man, began taking hormones that she went to a doctor that was far away from home, and so she was shocked to learn she was going to have to give herself shots, but she did, and things started to happen to her body. She wanted to start the hormones, she said, on her 19th birthday, which was only 5 weeks off. She went to a doctor, which required her to have only a 1-hour appointment each week and approved the therapy. She says in this piece, "That's hardly enough time to get to know someone, yet those 5 hours got me an official letter that unlocked the doors for me to get hormone therapy and become a, quote, man. Change my sex on my driver's license from female to male." It was so easy, and even friends, nobody really warned her against this. So she just kept doing it. She went to the doctor, and she got this treatment, prescription for testosterone. She gave herself shots, and she just kept doing that, and she kept seeing her body change. They started to have their effect, but not in the way that she expected. Started gaining more and more weight, skin started to get more puffy and discolored, blood started to thicken. She was now pre-diabetic, and another doctor, when she went for a second opinion, said that he was at risk for a heart attack or a stroke. Wow. Pretty sad. So he started to have second thoughts. He was now Jackson. His name had changed. He had changed his name. But he still kind of had to play along with the charade for a while until his grandfather came and sat him down to talk about it. He was and will remain the only person, Jackson says, whose opinion I will ever care about. With tears in his eyes, he asked me to stop. Everything in me wanted to keep going, not because I wanted it anymore, but because of pride. What will people think? But the treatment was about to kill him. He said, "I would have let the treatment kill me before admitting I'd screwed up. My grandfather's intervention may have saved my life." So he stopped it. He went through terrible withdrawal, on the floor, groaning, crying, throwing up, not able to keep anything down or eat, getting sick every single day. After 4 months of that, and losing that 50 pounds, finally got back to a semi-normal life, now more stable. But he says, "My body bears the scars of gender therapy. My voice is still deep, and I look very masculine. But I am thankful to have gotten off this horrible path alive before I had my body parts mutilated." So this happened before having any surgery. So this is one person. Wesley Smith mentioned people who regret it, and it's really permanent. This is one person who was able to come part way back, but it's pretty sad, and the medical community is complicit with this, at least some of them, and now it seems like it's being forced on the medical community in some ways. Well, let's go to the phones now. Rebecca wants to answer our question about celebrity endorsements. Rebecca's in Oklahoma. Thanks for calling in, Rebecca.
Oh, hello. Yeah, I was just, me and my mom was just discussing that just a couple of days ago. She said, "I'm really worried about all of this coming up, voting with the young kids," because she said say like Taylor Swift. She said how outspoken she is, and said that the kids they're not going to pay any attention. They're just going to say, "Oh, well, that's who she's endorsing. Well, we're with her," without any thought as to what the candidate stands for or anything. She said it's like a bunch of lemmings just jumping off a cliff. And
yeah.
so sad.
It is sad. So do you? Are you in that age group, that sort of millennial age group?
Oh, honey, I just turned 60 this year.
Oh, okay. You and your mom. Well, that's good.
Yeah, my mom just turned 90.
Okay.
So, yeah, but I've got kids, and thank goodness all of them have pretty, square heads on their shoulders.
So did they pay attention and follow politics, your kids?
Yes, they do. They do. I got 3 sons, and they see what's going on. They're not blind.
Yeah. Okay. Well, see, I think that's the important part of it. Thank you so much for your call, Rebecca, and for that report. I appreciate it. And you make a lot of common sense.
Okay.
And that is exactly the conclusion that Arthur Brooks comes to. In fact, he cites a study that was done in 2010 in the European Journal of Marketing. And the study showed that your level of, quote unquote, political salience, that is, the degree of information about an interest in politics, determines whether celebrity endorsements work on you. So people who have a lot of political salience, who pay attention, who evaluate according to news reports and factual information, they don't really listen to celebrity endorsements, and they don't care about them one way or the other. But if you have a low salience, Arthur Brooks says, a celebrity endorsement will increase your intention to vote for a politician by 28% compared with an endorsement by someone who isn't famous. If you have high political salience, the celebrity endorsement will lower your intention to support that politician by 11%. So because these celebrities like Miley Cyrus supporting Bernie Sanders, if you're politically salient, even if you like Miley, you will be less likely to follow her political endorsement, her political views, if you are paying attention. So that's just, I just wanted to kind of bring this before you to make the case for point of view and to say, listen to programs that give you political salience, that give you information that you can actually use in evaluating candidates and policies, because that way you will not be easily led by celebrities or anyone else. You'll be able to make your own decisions. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for joining me today. And we've got a couple of interesting topics tomorrow. One is Tim Winter from Parents Television Council is going to join me. We're going to talk about the fall shows and what their evaluation is of some of those on television. So that will be fun. I always enjoy getting updates from him. We're going to talk a little bit about President Trump pulling out of Syria and some other issues on the religious liberty front internationally. And we'll have a lot more, as you know. Thank you for joining me today. I want to thank Steve and also Karen and also Andrew for all their work behind the scenes. Have a great night, ladies and gentlemen. God bless you, and we'll see you tomorrow.
There's an old saying that the first casualty in war is truth. Maybe that helps you understand what's happening in America right now. Thankfully, it's not a war with bullets, but there is a war for control. Control of the country and control of your pocketbook. Truth is under fire, but you can help turn the tide by supporting Truth. Join the Truth team at Point of View Radio. Learn how you can make a difference at pointofview.net/team or call 800-347-5151. Don't let truth become a casualty on your watch. Pointofview.net/team and 800-347-5151.
So what would you do with an extra $500 a month in your budget? Pay off loans, save it, do something fun? Well, it's something you may need to think about if you become a member of MediShare. MediShare is a Christian healthcare sharing ministry, and it works. You can save big time on your healthcare costs, and you don't have to pay for things you don't believe in either. Find out more. Call 855-SHARE-40. That's 855-SHARE-40. 855-SHARE-40.
Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.